Fox sports a big hand for races like those, so he'll probably divide and conquer. So it might be one of those situations where the series of races gets her there about as much as it can, and then she'll prove whether she's truly worthy. And I think that's totally fine, right? She's a not this time on the top side, so you'd feel like that probably is a bit encouraging. Her dam ran twice, but and actually won the Pocahontas. I'm sorry, her sire ran twice and won. No, the dam ran twice and won the Pocahontas. That's my mistake. So this is
If
a
the
very
sire
eyeball family.
Pocahontas, that would be interesting.
Right. Yeah, her dam won the Pocahontas and then ran third in the juvenile filly. So I mean, there's some distance there, right? There's some belief that she could be a horse that that could be very interesting in the end, going a distance of ground. So it's a very Albaugh family being by not this time as well. But I agree with you completely in the assessment of the trip. I thought she was in trouble around the turn. I didn't think Irad was going to get was going to wait it out. And what I love about what he did is he showed this incredible amount of confidence in waiting when they straightened out. And I think Johnny V was almost baiting him into going inside. And Johnny probably knew, I might get beat either way. It's going to be harder for him to win if he has to go inside of me. And Irad just waited. This reminded me a lot of like vintage Ramon Dominguez, who would just wait and wait and wait. And it's one of those things like when you're on the freeway and you're getting close to a little bit of traffic, but you've got some time to your exit. You know you've got enough time to get out. And Irad waited right there and knew as soon as I get her outside, I mean, she is really going to kick. And she really did kick. So I like the kind of the profile, if you will, of this horse as far as going forward. Obviously, the disappointment in the race was Mythical. You know, the concern now is that Mythical's two worst performances have been in graded stakes company, and you'd have to wonder if she's probably just not quite the 2-year-old filly that she was last year. In many cases, too, we see these horses with such precocity early. They generally don't deliver as time goes by. I did think the runner-up Imperatrice, though, ran fine in what was a big jump up in class, and I could see her maybe being influential in some 3-year-old filly races this year. How about you?
Yeah, just touching on this too, Mythical, what she's shown so far is that when she can get that lone lead, she's just very tough and she runs fast. But then taking pace pressure, that seems to be the hurdle, right? So at this point, yes, it could be class, but also just establishing that lone trip. And if a horse just they see another horse, they want to pack it in. That's something that you need to monitor. I mean, maybe there's a scenario in one of these graded stakes races where she is kind of lone speed and can run her race. That could work, but I think it is something you have to consider when you're doing your pace handicapping. As far as Imperatrice, who did end up finishing second, got a good ride in there by Velasquez, and we'll talk about the inside, especially as we look at the next race at Gulfstream Park. But Imperatrice was really dominant on debut, and you like to see that with horse, or not on debut, I'm sorry, breaking her maiden at Gulfstream Park on December 13th. Taking that just kind of showed she could take that step up in class, and looks like one, like you mentioned, that could continue to do so.
As we await some of the seasonal debuts of horses that were impressive 2-year-old winners towards the end of last year, horses obviously like Super Corridora, Bella Ballerina, and Zany are the three that come to mind. We're going to see all three of those make their seasonal debuts over the course of the next couple of weeks. Zany Saturday in the Suncoast, Bella Ballerina more than likely on February 14th, and the Rachel Alexander, I believe Super Corridora is slated to go in the Las Virgenes this upcoming weekend. So that'll be very interesting. Obviously, Percy's Bar, who was disqualified from first in the Alcibiades, is going to be running back at Turfway in coming weeks. And we'll see some second starts of the year for horses like Explora, Tropa, and Taken by the Wind. So a lot going on in the Oaks division as we continue our march forward. Well, let's continue to our march forward, which is with the Holy Bull, which was the nightcap on the Saturday card at Gulfstream, the centerpiece of a 12-race card. And, I think it was kind of billed as a 3-way showdown, Emily, between Incredible, likely favorite Cannoneer, and Nearly, who had been an incredibly impressive winner of an allowance race a little bit earlier in the meet. And boy, it was not a 3-horse race coming home. It was a 1-horse race entirely. Questions of Nearly's effort as we watch that replay roll through.
Well, one of the things that you had mentioned, and as we watch, I'd almost prefer to come a little bit back, but we could rewind it. There is all those horses; they stayed off the inside, and as you were mentioning the forward gal, like you said, Johnny V kind of baiting to go inside. I don't know if there was something, but as I was watching this replay, the 5-horse Cannoneer was inside of Nearly, and they were probably 6-7 paths off the inside for no clear reason, right? Like they're contesting the pace. Maybe wanted to keep Nearly out, but it seemed like everything was by design. Which, as I watched this race, I just kept like going back to that. Like, why are they doing that? Why are they so far out there and Nearly sitting outside? And we had talked about Nearly after the allowance race on January 2nd, this being a horse that had caught your eye and stretching out, and they handled it here. Cannoneer again pushing the pace, maybe a little bit of a downgrade, as they did have a perfect trip back on December 29th, despite being dominant, getting that win at Churchill Downs. And then Incredible was actually the one horse in the race who was the closest towards the inside. So I don't know if there's something more to it. Gulfstream Park, I'm going to have to do a little bit more of a deep dive. It's not a track that I take notes for and follow race to race, but I don't know if you noticed that as well. And then one thing we will notice is the number 3 Project Ace comes closing late and galloping out, and that's probably a horse that people are going to catch, because those late runs, they tend to catch the eye, especially me. I like a closer, so yeah, it was a pretty solid race, but interestingly run.
Yeah, I already had somebody tell me, boy, that third horse was really flying late. And like, yeah, but
Yeah.
he got a giant pace to run at. Well, he's going to get a giant pace in the Derby. Yeah, those generally don't. Those horses generally burn a lot of money along the way. And granted, Gulfstream is not necessarily the easiest place to make big off the pace rallies, but yeah, we did see it. It generally is the case at Gulfstream that you do want to stay a couple paths off the rail, and we did see all of the dirt races won by horses making prolonged outside moves. So I don't want to throw the label of a or a dead rail on it without doing a little bit more work and looking for some horses that probably were supposed to run better that underperformed. Cannoneer was a big disappointment here. I think distance limitations are probably what comes to mind most, and it looks like he'll probably just top out as a sprinter, which, I think if you really held Brad Cox's feet to the fire beforehand, he probably would have said, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if he struggles with any additional ground. I think one of the good things about what has always made Johnny V so proficient is that he knows how to make things hard on a if he has that stalking type, he's not going to let you breathe if he's close. And that was what he did with Cannoneer, and he rode Nearly with a ton of confidence, and obviously he delivered very well. I'll tell you some of the issues I have with this race in terms of analyzing it and figuring out what to do with it moving forward. Take nothing away from Nearly. Nearly ran great. I wish we'd see him twice more before the Derby. We're probably only going to see him once more. I don't like that Incredible no-showed, and I don't love the horse that ran second. Right. And so it feels like a race that you're supposed to have a healthy bit of skepticism of. And now we're just going to get one more look at this horse before the Derby, who obviously is on this crazy upward trajectory at this point with 3 huge efforts in South Florida. You got a 99 Brisnet speed rating. At this point, he's going to be everybody's darling in the next future pool next week. His odds are going to just completely crater relative to where they were in the last pool. And we're going to get one shot, basically, at determining exactly how good he is. He's probably another horse that's going to roll into Louisville shortly before the Derby, and because apparently he's been wowing everybody in the morning since he started training. So he's a hard horse to assess altogether. It feels like distance-wise he has no issue, but boy, Emily, we've seen these kind of horses run well in South Florida over the years and just not deliver when they ship out of there.
Yeah, and I talked about it before. I think when we were analyzing that January 2nd race, I'm still questionable about distance. And obviously, he got the 2 turns here, and with that ground loss on their side, I don't know if it was with the track or not, but at least he did it. And this is a horse for me that, in some ways, I'm okay with seeing one more race. I think that will answer a lot of questions. It's also something that's going to impact the odds, right? Because if they're able to get another favorable trip, do everything right, that price is going to be could be even shorter, right? Could be favored. And then you're doing something completely new. And you brought up one of the biggest points of all is the Gulfstream Park transition. That's where he's been fast. Now the Brisnet 99 speed figure rating that we're seeing on there, he's shown kind of that almost the same race number wise for those 3 most recent starts. A 91 Brisnet on November 22nd, 97 in the allowance, and now a 99. And that's not really going to give him, unless he takes that big jump forward, it's not going to give him that much of a speed figure edge. And at this point, a horse that needs to be close to the pace. If you think that he's going to be a fast pace in the Derby, those are all factors to consider as well. So in some ways, I'm okay with one more race. I think I'll have all the information about this horse I'll need. And at that point, I'll also have the information of how the public is going to treat a horse like Nearly.
Yeah, totally fair. No argument from me on any of that. And we'll get that opportunity more than likely in the Florida Derby. Obviously, between now and then, we're going to see the comeback races for horses like Further Ado. We're going to see a comeback, of course, for Paladin coming up in the Risen Star. And I think we'll get a much clearer picture of exactly where we are. We're going to have some horses out west. I don't know if Golden Tempo is running in the Risen Star. I know he's slated to run again in New Orleans before it's all said and done. But working their way up the leaderboard, some of the horses that we, of course, are discussing right now, including Nearly Incredible, did not add any points. Bravaro is now on the list for that good second place finish there. And, take nothing away from Bravaro. Of course, he's obviously a very talented New York bred and stepping into open company. Given what we think as far as the pace goes, which, I mean, on the numbers, the pace was really, really strong. If that was the case, I mean, you do have to respect the effort of Bravaro, who really was never that far out of it.
No, and he was kind of wide and almost, I don't know if he's kind of rank or he's taking kickback. Sometimes it's tough to see at Gulfstream Park, but he is kind of sitting right outside those horses, even wider than normally you would be. So, and for staying on, I think it is a credit to this horse, but might need to settle a little bit or have to deal with dirt in their face one more time as far as that goes. And with this board right now, I mean, it seems just extremely wide open. As you mentioned, a lot of those preps coming up, including this weekend, the Southwest, where we could see some horses jump up in that race. It looks very competitive.
No doubt about it. It'll be great to see Todd Pletcher, of course, training Nearly 17 starters since Always Dreaming's win in 2017. He has but one third place finish to show for it during that period of time. That came from Audible in 2018, who also won the Holy Bull. With that, we're going to talk about one more 3-year-old race from Gulfstream on Saturday, the Swale, which went a little bit earlier. And the interesting thing about the Swale to me, Emily, is that we're going to talk about Solitude Dude, obviously, who was a really handy winner, the beneficiary of just a dream trip with his seemingly endless amount of speed. He flew out of the gate. He established a very easy lead and really never looked in doubt. Interestingly, Saffie Joseph Jr. has announced that he will stretch out for his next start. And they're going to try and send him long in the Fountain of Youth. And I think at the very least, he's going to be a thorn in the side of anybody in there that wants to show speed.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a good move, right? You find out what you have, and it's kind of like
Right.
what we were talking about as far as the 8 bells. It's like find out now, and if that's the case, you can go forward, or if you need a rabbit, there you go as well. Though I don't think they would necessarily do that to a good horse, but with Solitude Dude, easy for me to say, a horse that just really stood out on paper as well. I mean, in terms of from a speed figure standpoint, it was their race, not only with that pace advantage, but huge speed figure advantage going into this race. And as you can see, that was not lost on the public at odds of 1-5 and did what needed to be done. Showed that legitimate gate speed, took a little bit of pace pressure, but a 23 for Gulfstream Park on this day and a sprint distance well within themselves for this race. So I like the move that they're going to try to stretch out and see where they go. I don't necessarily see it with this individual, but at least they're going to give him a try.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, still ample opportunities to sprint after that. And the money in this division really grows as the year goes on, right? You're looking at more of a Pat Day Mile potentially type and a Woody Stevens horse. Is worth mentioning, and we discussed a little bit the inside pass. Class President, who was the second choice in here and ended up finishing second, he did spend a good amount of time inside of Solitude Dude. Wasn't really on the rail. They were a path or so off of it. But he did spend a little bit of time inside. This was only his second career start. I want to give Class President another opportunity in the future. I also wondered, and we talked about this in the Pick 5 show that we taped on Friday, I thought this was a surprising move from Todd going to 7/8 off the 1 mile win. And I wonder if it's just that he's got a lot of horses and wanted to get a race into Class President. But I think Class President's next start will really be indicative of what Todd thinks of him. If he keeps him short, he might have some worries about distance. But if he wants to stretch this horse back out, I could see him maybe in the Tampa Derby or a race like that to to maybe try and run better against some tougher competition. But it will be tremendously interesting, of course, to see Solitude Dude go forward off of that big performance. Speaking of big performances, and one that we wanted to highlight specifically in this space, it came out west, and it was a comebacking runner that was entered in the Malibu. Of course, we're talking about Cornucopian, who had been a tremendously impressive debut winner last year at Oaklawn, and was thrown to the wolves really in the Arkansas Derby. Still ran a tremendous race in there. He went off the reservation, so to speak, after he ran a poor race at Aqueduct, but was slated to come back in the Malibu, had an issue in the paddock. Emily, he made a comeback start at Santa Anita on Saturday in a pretty salty allowance race that included a couple of horses that had looked good, one of whom was a stablemate that ended up scratching. Let's take a look at this race. So Cornucopian, you're going to see, is the 5-horse here, making a move up the inside. Walk us through the final 5/8 or so of this race. It was not uneventful for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say we're just about to hit trouble as they start to move inside. But opposite from Gulfstream Park, you can see Cornucopian sitting behind the pace setters. He's going to look to make that rail run. Maybe a little bit tough to see, but they're gonna steady around the turn with momentum going forward. Staying committed along the inside with Juan Hernandez, checks right there. Yeah, loses momentum, loses a little bit of position, and remains just, again, another horse that was just, I mean, very dominant. It looked like it didn't bother him at all. They stayed committed to the inside. And then when they found that opening, I mean, this horse, he explodes. He is, one of the things I don't like to personally see a horse like geared down, shut down like they are, and he is still running through the wire. That horse, I mean, that he's got his foot not on the gas but on the brake, and that horse is still closing. This was a huge effort, and his debut win at Oaklawn, it was a very good race. But he's a horse that I always had a little bit of questions on training up to. This effort was monstrous. This was a really big effort. Like you said, I mean, I hope he can continue to go forward. He'd be a very exciting horse to continue to watch, especially with these type of efforts and stepping up in class.
Yeah, hard to think, and races like the Churchill Downs on Derby Day and the Met Mile sort of come to mind. I think one of the most impressive things to me was that you were highlighting the trouble he ran into just around the quarter pole, is how quickly after he was steadied, he was in front. Right. It was like 70 yards that he got a little bit of open space. And, one of those sort of quintessential rides where Juan Hernandez didn't have to push him anywhere. He took Juan Hernandez everywhere he needed to go. And I think we were able to see the gallop out on there too. I mean, and he went even further clear on the gallop out. So yeah, it's easy to gush about a good performance like that. I did not get the Brisnet speed number. I do know he got a 97 Beyer speed figure, which obviously is a great comeback number. You would expect a little bit more, of course, in the future. And Bob Baffert will have some options. I think the Triple Bend is around Santa Anita handicap, so you could see him if he stays domestically over the course of the next couple of months. But I would imagine races like the Churchill Downs and the Met Mile will be mid-range targets. And I don't know why you'd close the book altogether on him going long, right? I don't know why.
Neither of his races going long are bad races by any means. I mean, he might have just, what kind of worried me a little bit, if he's that type of horse where he just has that one big effort and it takes him a while to recover. And then that was the case in the Arkansas Derby where he had 34 days. He might be a horse that he needs 2 months and then another race, right? He just needs that extra recovery time because he just puts out a monster type effort. That would be like the one concern. But I don't think any of those races or what he showed here, that distance is an issue for him at all. I think it's just a matter of having that horse ready to go and to run his race. And that also should be credited too with that late scratch in the Malibu, that they come right back. I mean, Bob Baffert must have known this horse is live. This horse is live. This horse is race ready. We got to find a spot as soon as possible because he's ready to run out of his skin. And he did just that.
He certainly did. I mean, it was impressive to see. Obviously, we'll be super excited to see where he ends up going in his next spot. Because it will obviously be one where, he gets a ton of fanfare. This is a horse that obviously turned heads with the debut. And I think the fact that the connections were so aggressive with him certainly garnered him a lot of attention and support. One of the things that has garnered a lot of attention and plenty of support from the players at TwinSpires.com has been the tournament scene. And we had a KDBC qualifier over the weekend on Saturday. Of course, you can join Emily on Spaces regularly talking a lot of game strategy, going over some things that will definitely help you hone your skills a little bit as far as tournaments go. So, Emily, how did that Kentucky Derby Betting Challenge qualifier go on Saturday?
This was an interesting tournament as well because we can even take one step further. This qualifier was supposed to be at Oaklawn Park for the Southwest, right? So a lot of players kind of going like, "Oh, cool, Oaklawn is a track I'm familiar with. I've been playing there this time of year." And things get changed up at Tampa, and it throws players off when all of a sudden they're 5,000 non-winners of three, 5,000 non-winners of two, horses that aren't very fast, and that was the majority of that first half of the card. So I think that was something to consider, and really the way that the card stuff was put together at Tampa is that there were those claiming races early on that are just they're very tough. They take a lot of work, and then later on you had those stakes races where you had a little bit more form. And connections that are familiar, right? And so a lot of the players were playing very cautiously early on. Nick Sievers, who I stream with on Spaces, actually jumped out to an early lead, caught 100. I'm trying to remember the odds. A 5-1 shot, $150. He did a Dutch win bet on a favorite he thought was vulnerable, and he jumped up to 945 early on. Our Spaces dropped. Nick lost reception. He couldn't get any more plays in. He was disqualified. So he had that lead going into, I believe, I want to say like race 7. And I put something out and I said, Nick's done. Like he has not met his minimums. This is open. And a lot of the players are smart enough to recognize what's going on there. But for those last few races that you had, try to pull up the card right now, I guess. Race 7 with a maiden special weight race, and then was it race 7 or race 8? And I guess I should have this like
race 7 was actually the Tampa Bay. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. There we go. Yeah. So that's where people,
9th, right?
The 7th and 9th, and so that's where people were making their plays. But at that point in time, because Darren had wrote this later, he's like, everybody, I'd replied to a tweet, everybody waited to that last race to play, and it's like, yes, but no, because you need to have capital. You need to have capital going into that last race, right? If both you and I are going for the win, whatever we have in our bankroll, if it's going to get us there, we're going to play it. If I have $500 and I like the 5, and you have $800 and you like the 5, you should beat me every time. Right. So it is about, there's so much to bankroll management getting to that point that, yes, everybody's going to make moves in that last race, but what have you been able to do with your bankroll up into that point in time? And you can see where the scores are, that they're pretty solid scores. I mean, you're 4 figures all the way down as far as it's showing right now. Players were playing. It was just a matter of where you had your capital. Howard Kravitz, now this tournament awarded 3 seats. So first, second, and third are all winners, and fourth place paid out $2,100. That breakage, because TwinSpires 100% goes back to the players. Howard had 2 tickets that were within range. They're pretty tight, and I think his other entry finished in 8th with 1320. So he was able, as we talk about capital, he was able to position both those tickets to maybe even get both of them in there, the way that, just depending on what the scores were going to end up. And I think that's where being a seasoned player, and even some of the players on here, they had to decide what is going to be a top 3. Is it going to be early on? The scores weren't really that high. Is it going to be a 2,500? No one had really jumped up type of day. There's a scenario where it could be 1,300, right? You take a player like Brad Anderson. Brad Anderson knows what it takes to win a tournament. He had capital going into that last race. He ended up making win bets on 3 different horses, and one of them hit at 1352. That makes me think, Brad doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He must have thought that 1352 is going to get that top 3 spot. And it's just a matter of how players are going to play at that point. It makes these tournaments very tough. Howard had similar opinions. Like I said, his other entry was at 1,300. There's probably some scenario that he thinks that's going to be good enough to win, and that's how I'm going to play. And the other one can go for a little bit more because I have that position in the tournament and I have the capital in order to give myself those 2 spots. And that's what moved him up to 22.10. Joseph Carnival, who ended up finishing second, but again gets the seat, so it's basically like the same as first. Used their bankroll to maximize. Ended up playing win bets in race 9. Had $400 on the 5, who ended up winning and that coming back 2080, but also had bet $485 on the 4. So he was giving himself 2 outs in order to get there. But again, he had the capital in order to do so, and that was able to move him up. And similar for Vincent, who was able to play his entire bankroll in that last race on the 5. Or I shouldn't say that. He made a lot of win bets on, as we're looking at it there, on the 5, and then backed up in exactas if the 5 finished second. So a good opinion, but also gave themselves some outs. And Lawrence Bergen, just, it's one of those things. He had $314 that he bet to win. He has 600. He's up there. It's one of those things. So that's why these tournaments are so interesting. And yes, a lot of those moves can come late, but you have to have yourself in position. And that's why you see, as we're looking at Lawrence Bergen right there, that's why you see those show bets early on, because it's preserving your bankroll. Or even as we're looking at Jackson right now, playing just conservatively early on with their bankroll. Jackson was actually on the spaces for a little bit and really deciding to pick their spots. Ended up doing a $300 win bet on the 5 in the finale and getting that spot and just missing again 1560. There's a scenario where 1560 was the right number for that tournament at that time. So a lot of really smart players, but an interesting tournament the way that it was set up at Tampa with those races early on and people waiting, getting their capital, and exploding on a lot of the same opinions in the last race.
Yeah, obviously it becomes very interesting for the purposes of a contest like this, for the final race to be a stake or a little bit more high profile race. And, I would say, Emily, I feel like now with contest play being so live money oriented, and now we really only see, outside of the NHC and some online activity, everything is live money, which is much, much better. One of the things I think I see is in terms of an evolution in contest play is that I feel like the way other sports have gone through kind of an analytics era, what we're seeing now more so in the last 5 or 6 years is that people are making sizable wagers on short priced horses or short priced combinations in order to give them some level of bankroll preservation or slight moves up so that they develop a bit more capital. And it used to be, I would joke everybody 10 or 11 years ago that a lot of the people who regularly played live money contests played it like a $2 win place contest, and they would bet, 500 to 1 on a 10 to 1 shot. So I was always a little concerned if a price like that won. I was never concerned if the favorite won. Now, and you see a guy like Marshall Graham who won the BCBC in 2020 and made I think a $30,000 win bet that year on Monomoy Girl. Jonathan Kinchin finished second, made a similar bet on Monomoy Girls. Sean Borman won in 2023. He made giant win bets on White Barrio and the Chad Brown filly who won the Filly and Mare Sprint earlier on in the day. It feels like that's kind of, at least, I'm not saying everybody does it, but that's been a bit of evolution. Are you seeing kind of some of that as you look through some of these plays and see this activity?
To some extent, I would say, and yes, that if there are, and yeah, yes, there, and a lot of that just has to do with the type of player that it is and the number that they need at that early on point in time. But a lot of the players are, especially in these tournaments that we're seeing, are kind of playing for a number and
Right.
and utilizing if they can multiple entries in order to get there, where you'll see that kind of sacrifice early on. Maybe it is like, to your point, covering, this is a race, there's it's a 6-horse field, there's 2 horses that stand out. One
Right.
entry is taking one entry is taking the other. I don't really care about the price. I'm just trying to double up. Now I'm doubled up.
Right.
I know it's gonna get me to this number. I know it's gonna get me to this number. And so to that point, there are opportunities when you kind of know what those players are gonna do and where they kind of sink in on chalk horses, how to play around that or try to take advantage of. A lot of the times playing with Nick is, we start the analysis, we're looking at the favorite, and we know that there's going to be players that are all in, whether it's doubles, whether it's win, whether they're rarely keying exactas, but sometimes. And it's like if we can find that right favorite that is vulnerable, this is not only an opportunity to move up and take advantage of that spot, but it also that there's a lot of people that are going to drop down. You're going to get a lot of people that are out because that's
Sure.
how they play.
Yeah.
And so to know that. So in some ways, those type of Tampa opportunities, it's not a one-off. Something like that can come up again where a lot of the players are going to wait until those short price horses in the stakes race. You can try to take advantage early on or look at those races and say those favorites are going to be heavily, that high used type horse. I like a 10-1 in there. That's going to be my play. Not only am I going to move up, but a lot of my competition is going to drop down. But it is something you always have to think about, that there are those favorites that people are really going to go for. I know another time with Nick where he was in the lead and there was a horse that was a short price. And it's like, someone might take their entire bankroll and bet on that horse and jump you, but you can't sacrifice your bankroll trying to hedge them. Like it's just,
No.
like sometimes it's just that's the position that you're in. You've got to kind of do your hedging before, right? So that you're not in that scary spot or on the side.
No question about it. Well, that's a great recap. Obviously, a lot to look forward to in the contest space as well this weekend. The Oakland Southwest Showdown on Friday, $1,000 entry fee, $750 bankroll, $250 prize pool. That will offer seats to the Oakland Horse Players Championship, which is going to be on Saturday, a $2,500 bankroll, $1,000 prize pool, $3,500 entry. Also, the $1,000 Sam Davis KDBC NHC qualifier on Saturday as well. So a lot to look forward to. Emily, of course, will walk you through all of that at the TwinSpires Tournaments Twitter X feed, where she will have spaces probably both of those days, right? Friday and Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure about Wednesday, but Oakland coming back on Thursday. We'll probably do some coverage as well. Wednesday night we've been trying to do Turfway, but could just turn into a long week. But yeah, well, definitely something before then. But no question about it. Friday and Saturday, 100% we'll be covering those tournaments.
No doubt Mother Nature has been somewhat uncooperative, hoping for better weather across the country as we make our way into February. Of course, unfortunately, Punxsutawney Phil did see his shadow today, but I don't think I would need to convince a lot of the people out there in the Northeast or the upper Midwest that there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. One place where there will be more winter as well, but that's a good thing, is at Santa Anita Park. And I'm going to talk about a horse that ran yesterday in the nightcap on Sunday, race number 8 for the Stable Alert feature that you can activate right here at twinspires.com. So in this nightcap, I want you to keep an eye on the 2 Timekeeper's Charm. They're the Purple Silks, second off the rail, the 2 horse. This horse just gets into the check machine here, steadied multiple times going down the backstretch. This was a bulky field of Cowbreds, and Timekeeper's Charm just never got to a comfortable spot. We're going to see Tiago Pereira completely steady this horse out around the turn, racing along the inside the entire way. And regardless of whether you're talking to me about track bias, when you're talking about horses that are along the rail, when the entire race flow is on the outside, you want to upgrade them for that reason. And that's exactly the case. So what you're going to see with Timekeeper's Charm when she comes back in her next start, is you're going to see a really ugly running line. Right. And a lot of your peers are not going to watch this, where you're going to see that this is a horse that basically is just jogged in for the final 3/16 of a mile. So she's going to end up finishing, I think, 12th, beaten, roughly 15, 20 lengths. And this was a performance that really was completely ruined around the turn. She was mid-range price going in, I think 10 or 12 to 1. A horse that you definitely want to upgrade. Add to your stable alerts. Good thing is when she's back in, I will alert you to it as well on the TwinSpires app and via the program pages with expert picks, because this is a horse that I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on. But obviously a function for people like you and I, Emily, that like to watch trips, look at track bias type things. Stable alert function invaluable in terms of being ready when these horses come back.
Yeah, having some type of methodology is key. Like, and again, you still have to handicap, right? If Timekeeper's Charm comes back in a grade 1, that might not be
I
the
think we'll
time that you
pass.
want to
Yeah.
you want to get you want to get back involved, right? Everything is it's context, right? Or even if they run back in next week or comes back in 4 months, those are things that you need to consider in terms of trip. But it's a good way to at least catalog those horses and train your eye to watch races and do that consistently, because that is your biggest edge as a horse player, is being able to use that. That assesses form, right? We have the speed figures for
Right.
us, a lot of good speed figure makers that are out there, tons of good pace tools. I've heard of one called Optics Plot. I think it's good. But there's a few that are out there that help in terms of assessing pace, tools that as far as class, and again, how do you know when a horse is going to run back to a top form? Getting those race watching and being able to note that is that final piece of the puzzle that is that separator and gives you an edge as a horse player.
No doubt about it. Make sure you are using the stable alert function at twinspires.com. Well, Emily, the upcoming weekend, just wanted to touch on a race coming up before we go out the door. Decode is back, second time out in the Southwest. The rescheduled Southwest will now take place on Friday. Field of $14 million on the line. Just an incredible race. I know you'll have us all set up with expert picks at twinspires.com, but I'm excited to see Decode, Strategic Risk, and everyone else.
I thought this race was really tough, and Decode for sure. I mean, that the race was massive, and they've been pointing to this spot. Again, this is one of those things I just talked about, right? Like, is this going to be the right time and place? And what I am concerned about Decode is that they're just going to be too short, and then that's going to create opportunities on other horses. Both you and I downgraded Strategic Risk from their most recent start, getting the win in the Smarty Jones, as they had a perfect trip, had that race flow in their favor. But then Bob Baffert sends in a couple of other horses, and I actually prefer Butane. They were also entered to run in the Grade 3 Holy Bull, so I don't know if they call another audible, but I prefer Butane over Litmus Test. Litmus Test is listed as the morning line favorite. Again, I'm not sure if Decode winds up favored. That would not surprise me. But as far as Litmus Test, they ran that big speed figure in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and that number stands out. And obviously, running back to that number, this is going to be the horse to beat. However, that number, you could kind of take it as an outlier. Those other speed figures do not give them Litmus Test an edge in this race. They're basically on par with everybody else. So again, that just comes into assessing value. We talked about Rancho Santa Fe as a horse that really didn't have a chance to run in the Smarty Jones. The way the race played out, they find a massive rider change. Flavian Pratt comes around. This would be the time that you'd want to play Rancho Santa Fe, because you're going to get big odds. Are they good enough? Remains to be seen, right? They're still gonna have to show their race, but in terms of playing, that this would be the time and place for them. Yeah, it's a very solid race. 14 are signed on, 12 will go, and competitive all around. I think we'll get a lot of answers out of this race as well.
Yeah, eagerly looking forward to it for sure. Eager to get Oaklawn Park back in the mix on Thursday. They'll have a 4-day racing week this week, making up for some of those cancellations. Well, Emily, thank you. Of course, we'll be looking forward to not only the tournament work, but expert picks at Oaklawn coming up.
Yes, I'm excited. I have the very tough cards coming up, but that's what we like, actually. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I
don't look
envy
at
you
me
when
to
I
try
see
to
those.
I'm not one that's going to try to sweep the card, but I want to make sure if there's if there's some favorites that are vulnerable, I want to make sure those are the races that I attack and try to give a little bit of information elsewhere. So yeah, there should be plenty of opportunities to get involved and play horses this upcoming week at Oaklawn.
We're definitely looking forward to them. Well, that's it for this edition of the TwinSpires Weekend Rewind. For Emily, Nick here. Until next time, best of luck.